Now, recently, I saw this from you on Twitter. You acknowledged, and it has been noticed by many, that many people in the VR community on platforms like Twitter, Upload VR, Facebook, and more have moved to become part of Facebook Reality Labs. Now, I saw you voice your concern on how Facebook can control the media, investors, developers in the XR space to a very significant degree once they join Reality Labs. What I'd like to ask, though, is truly what's the main concern here? Is this all on Facebook? Because if other larger companies like Apple were involved, wouldn't it be exactly the same thing, since unfortunately we represent companies at all times these days when we're on social platforms?
Could you clarify what you said at the end about Apple?
Sure. The last sentence basically was, let's say instead of being Facebook, that this was Apple into XR. Would it not be the exact same situation, as people represent these companies at all times when on social platforms? Therefore, these companies are all controlling the media to a certain degree.
Well, you have to follow the money, right? And I think that's one of the biggest issues with our space, is that the majority of consumer applications are powered by Facebook now. That the majority of the grants that go up to developers is from Facebook. Facebook even is active in VC, so a lot of the money going into companies is coming from Facebook. And my concern here is that there's this, basically the developers that they want to compete with, the rest of the developers that are being given grants, that are being given capital, they won't say anything. And my biggest concern here is the fact that truth becomes subjective to a lot of people because they are not participating in that truth. My truth is not the same as the majority of developers because they didn't experience this. And so, further expanding on this, if you raise capital as a startup, you have an obligation from your investors to exit that company. The majority of the times these days, it looks like Facebook is predominantly the only one who will acquire companies. This creates a significant conflict of interest. In fact, one of the main reasons I'm so upset is that after I started coming out with Facebook, I was told by my investors from the VR fund, first of all, I was called a whiny bitch by Tipitat, and I was informed that if I continued to speak out against Facebook, they would sue me. This is a fact, and that is why I left YUR. They were insinuating that they were going to sue me by speaking out against Facebook. In fact, the DOJ reached out to me and said, would you like to speak to us? My investors, again, because of the conflict of interest of Facebook, told me I could not speak to the federal government of the United States. And that is a fact. And so I speak here because the reality of the situation of what a lot of people have to endure because they can't be honest is terrible. And I will not stand for it because I did not start a company to be disrespected like that. I did not start a company to bootlick Zuckerberg. I started a company to change the world and be a better person.
I will open up the debate floor to you, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure how to respond to that. So can you answer the question about Facebook Reality Labs? Like, how do you feel about the specific individuals who join Facebook Reality Labs?
I mean, they're great. David's cool, man. I was part of Upload before. Like, I don't hold this against these people who join here. I mean, my truth is expensive, okay? To be honest like this is expensive, all right? And so I say these truths because I want people to understand the reality of it. But these people joining, honestly, I think most of them are pretty cool. But they also then sign an NDA and they can't say anything either.
Let me chime in here real quick to help. I know, Ryan, I can see the problem you had on kind of responding to that. At the heart of the question, let's pretend Apple joins VR, AR, XR tomorrow, and they start doing these same practices. Are you as vocal back to them as you are Facebook doing the same thing? Or is Facebook more on a pedestal for whatever reason? And that's to you, Six.
Wait, so respond.
Well, it is Ryan's turn. I apologize. I did mess that one up. So basically, to bring in a direction, the question kind of brings up that Facebook, by possibly taking these people who are very vocal in the community has an ability to control the media. That was per your tweet. And the question would be, let's say Apple comes into the scene tomorrow and does the exact same thing. Is this about the practice of that happening, or is this accentuated just because it is Facebook and your history with them? Is it bad that this is happening, or pretty much the standard items that go on all the time? I'd like Ryan to start off answering that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I do think Apple kind of gets a pass on a lot of this stuff for good reason, because they haven't had privacy issues. And they are extremely secure, and they just seem, to do what they say. But they are one of the most opaque companies in the world, probably the most opaque tech company in the world. So, that's just kind of how Apple is. I mean, you look at something like the Apple Watch, and you're talking about biometric data. Nobody's got more biometric data than Apple from the Apple Watch. But at the same time, they're using it to save people's lives and help people get healthier. So I think it's very much viewed as a net positive. If Apple had a data breach, how would people react? I don't know. That's a really interesting question to me, because I do feel like they're just perceived very differently. But yeah, I mean, I would be curious to hear what Six has to say about, how. Do you have feelings about Apple entering the VR space, given how opaque they are?
We got you there, Six. I think that was to you.
That was to you.
Yeah, I don't appreciate these conversations of what about Apple? Because honestly, they do a lot of terrible things too. In fact, the most recent example of this is everybody's gotten these air tags, right? Yeah, that's going to kill Tile, okay? And there's a recent video that came out on YouTube about the paradox of choice, where they gave this company, Tile, the ability to adopt their version of Find Me. But that's going to kill the company, because then the entire tiled network is built off these distributed tiles. I criticize based off my own life story, and I don't want to get involved too heavily in things I don't fully understand. And I think that's part of what debating properly is about sharing your own experiences with others. I personally have never had an experience like that with Apple, but from many of the things I've read, Apple is very aggressive in the same way. I see what happened with the Peloton. Supposedly, the Apple Watch is no longer supported by Peloton, and that was because of Apple. And so I think the larger thing I want to emphasize here, this constant whataboutism between Apple and Facebook. I think we as developers and users have to be concerned about the truths in our space. And the truth is Apple does kill a lot of the developers on their platforms as well. But when it comes to Facebook, they're notorious for having issues with privacy. And I simply share my own experiences.